Dr. Ava Cadell, you are a certified sex therapist. Do you have a problem with spanking on some sort of psychosexual basis?
Well, I do. First of all, I think it's wrong to teach children that violence is the way to sort out a problem. It's not the solution to any problem. But I do have patients who were spanked as children, and it has resulted in some sexual proclivities, including sadomasochism, bondage, and pain.
But you know, Dr. Cadell, I really think that in those cases there are some other intervening variables going on here, because most American children, I think, are spanked or disciplined physically in some way, shape, or form. And certainly the majority of them do not grow up to have those kinds of psychosexual problems that you're talking about.
Well, I don't think that most children are spanked, not today in the new millennium. I think that the smart parents, the ones who are educated, who can control their anger, communicate to their children, they reward their children for good behavior, and then they take away things that the kids enjoy when they're misbehaving.
The fact is, though, that most parents approve of spanking. They think it's an effective form of discipline, and they think it can be used right as long as it's administered in a loving, controlled manner.
How can spanking be administered in a loving, controlled manner?
Well, you know what, Dr. Cadell, hang on, hold on, because I want to raise a fantastic quote, because this comes from Dr. James Dobson of Focus on the Family. And he says, quote, "In those situations when the child fully understands what he's being asked to do or not to do, but refuses to yield to adult leadership, an appropriate spanking is the shortest and most effective route to an attitude adjustment. A boy or a girl who knows love abounds at home will not resent a well-deserved spanking. One who is unloved or ignored will hate any form of discipline." So, Dr. Cadell and Dr. Severe, I want you to address this as well, but let me go to Dr. Cadell first. If a child knows that they're surrounded by love in the home and that this form of discipline is done with love because they are trying to restrain the child or modify the child's behavior, what's wrong with that?
Well, the problem is that violence promotes more violence, and it's letting the child know that it's okay to hit another child, or when they grow up to hit their spouse. I mean, the problem is there are no boundaries. You know, a little tap on the butt to one family might be adequate, whereas to someone else it could be a huge, you know, bruise and a beating. And so I think it should just be eliminated.
But that's not spanking. That's crossing the line into abuse.
That's correct.
That's beating a child. That's not spanking.
I know, but people don't. There are no boundaries today. I mean, somebody can spank someone lightly, somebody else can spank them hard.
All right, Dr. Severe, let me go to you, because it seems like with these progressive parents today, they put the child in the corner, they call it timeout. Timeout doesn't seem to be cutting it in a lot of these cases, because young children don't understand it, older children don't respect it. So isn't there room here for some sort of more aggressive disciplinary action?
Well, not in my opinion. You know, and I want to comment on something that was said earlier. I've been working with parents for about 30 years, and there are far fewer parents today who use spanking than when I first started in this business. I do think the timeout, losing consequences are very good alternative forms of punishment that teach more of a lesson. You know, the bottom line is this, Monica. Why do you want your children to behave? Do you want them to behave because it's the right thing to do, and you want them to have good self-esteem for learning self-control and self-management? Or do you want them to behave because they're afraid if they don't, they get in trouble? So the problem with spanking, not only does it emulate violence, or certainly it emulates hitting. You know, adults are not allowed to hit other adults. Why should they be allowed to hit children? The other point is that when children are spanked, they often lose self-esteem because they feel that they're unworthy of their parents' love. So Dr. Dobson's quote, part of that's very accurate. In a loving, supportive environment, children are more understanding of punishment, but I don't think that it needs to be corporal punishment. And, you know, and this is an issue that will always be debated, because corporal punishment, unlike any other issue in parenting, it really sits on the fence between a child's rights and the parent's rights. So it will always be debated.
Bridget, what about the parents' rights to exercise reasonable authority over their children? I mean, this discussion really centers on the children's rights, but what about the parents' rights to discipline their children in a reasonable way?
Definitely, parents should be able to decide what form of discipline is appropriate. And in most cases, parents use verbal discipline or timeouts or grounding first, but they may have a very willfully disobedient or defiant child, and spanking may be their last resort. Parents should be able to use this as they see fit. And by spanking, I just mean one or two swipes on the buttocks, you know, just enough to make them feel minor pain, not to injure them, but just enough to get their attention so that the child can see what they've done to misbehave.
You know, I am so proud of this court in Connecticut because cases like this really are a distraction. It takes time and resources away from the real child abuse cases because we're stuck investigating these kinds of things which are nonsensical, and the real abuse cases get short shrift. Dr. Severe, Bridget, Dr. Cadell, thank you so much for joining us tonight.